Well, hello there. How are you doing, glorious people? Wonderful, wonderful to have you with us today. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. How are you? Goodness me, we have a fantastic full house, and I need to turn off this recording right there. Good morning to you all. How wonderful to have you here today. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us today. Good morning, Peter and Julie and Catherine and Drumstick and Tony and Shin and Greg and Bonnie and Cavan and Brett and Trudy and Christine and Crazy Bunny and Synchronized Souls and Dad Hooper. And remind me, ask me questions as we go through, please. And good morning, Shell and Lady Stardust and Laura and Leo Guy and Paul and Fran and Astro King and Rowie and Andy. Hey, lovely people, Cheryl Flanders, Gazgano, Mr. Mensa. How glorious is it to see you all here today? I am absolutely thrilled to have you here with us. It is, of course, Monday, July the 1st, 2024. It's just gone 1 minute past 9 a.m. British summertime. Wonderful, wonderful, as I say, to have you here with us. Can you believe it's July the 1st? I just can't get my head around any of this. I simply can't. And good morning to Lorna. Hello, Lorna. Lorna said, thank you for giving me a news home. How wonderful. I love letters and emails like this. I really do, because we are crafting a new beginning around here. That is exactly what we're doing. And Lorna sent me a quote from Julian Assange. Of course, we were talking about Julian Assange a lot on Friday, and we'll continue to. And Lorna sent me the quote of Julian Assange, which says, the reason the FBI wouldn't let the Epstein client list come out in court is because if they did, their blackmail would no longer be useful, and the CIA would lose their control over all the powerful people they spent decades setting up. And Pauline also wrote to me about Julian Assange and said, I feel there are a lot of questions to be asked regarding Julian Assange. Here is a video presented by Richard D. Hall from quite a while ago. Very interesting. I know the one you mean, Pauline. Thank you for sending that. So as you can see already, we're starting off with mixed views, and it's going to be one of those kind of shows. I reckon that there are going to be a lot of mixed views going on here today, and I for one look forward to it, because we don't want to be this, echo chamber where everybody agrees with everybody and I only bring on people that I agree with or like. No, we don't want any of that. We've seen all that, haven't we? That's what they do in mainstream. So before we bring on our first guest, I just want to recap on this Jay Slater situation, because it is something we've been following. 2 weeks ago today, almost to the hour actually, that the 19-year-old apprentice bricklayer from Lancashire went missing. Jay Slater. This story interests me on a number of levels, not just because it's been off since the beginning, but because it's been catapulted to international media prominence. And that always interests me. As viewer and regular contributor Mark Porritt pointed out to me, Jay Slater's disappearance isn't unusual. In fact, this year alone, there have been several British men and women who have disappeared, like TV doctor Michael Mosley and Jay, but little has been said about them. Let me start again on that. We'll look a little at them in a short while. Just some of my observations. His dad, Jay's dad, is obviously in Tenerife. He was giving a TV interview, and when asked if he'd like to see the British police involved, he started to speak and then mumbled and then walked off, which was weird. Then there was the weird sort of testimony to this morning from Jay's mate Brad, which we'll also look at in a minute. And there was a sort of almighty push for a search over the weekend before the police said that they were going to call it off. The family, especially the father, is mad that more members of the public did not turn up to search. Yet these people aren't joining the search. He didn't join the search. He said it was difficult for him. To my knowledge, Jay's mother hasn't been searching. Where have I heard all this before? Oh, yes. I remember now, Kate McCann didn't search for Madeleine. She admitted to not searching for Madeleine in the first TV interview before she went back and revised that in her book. So the police are saying that the searching has ended for now. And it would appear that the police are actually looking more at a criminal case rather than just a straightforward missing person case. Well, not in the usual way anyway. Obviously, he's missing, but it is possible that he has come to some harm, some deliberate harm. And there is increasing circumstantial evidence to suggest Jay was taken. Did he cross the wrong people? He may have been a bad boy in Lancs, but not necessarily amongst the criminal underworld of Tenerife. So, as I say, on Saturday, police launched their final push, appealed for an army of volunteers to help, but just 6 people turned up to join 24 mountain rescue and fire teams in the remote area of Mascot, northwest Tenerife, where he was last seen. And so I think that is all very interesting. Police are looking through CCTV. There are suggestions that Jay may have been stabbed, according to information circulating online. And let us not be quick to dismiss what is said online, because I would hazard a guess that a lot of the information that's come through online has been used by the police. And as we reflected on Friday, it's all well and good for legacy media to be all haughty and call people trolls and all stuff like that. But there is a lot of intel coming through. But the fact is, things are not adding up. We heard from his friend Lucy Law that when Jay rang her, there was only 1% phone charge left on his phone. And yet, how did Jay manage to speak to his friend Brad afterwards, when Brad recalled this morning that Jay stumbled? And why has Brad only just come out? Why have we only just heard from him? It's very weird indeed. And so I think there's a lot more to this. What Brad said was he could see his friend's feet sliding down the hill. And here he was walking on gravel. So all of this is really quite curious. I think it's a bizarre story. I don't think it adds up at all. And we've still yet to find out how much money has been withdrawn by Jay's mum from the GoFundMe. When I checked last night, I think it was up to £43,000. And I think that's really interesting. And especially because so few turned up for the search. But honestly, wasn't Jay's mum saying that they wanted the money to bring people over from England, to surround themselves by people, get them involved in the search and everything? So I think all of that is very curious and very interesting. Heel in the Silence says something smells very fishy and has a nasty stink. Yeah, I think so. I hear you. And just to reflect on those other cases that Mark Porritt was talking about, there was a British hiker went missing in the Pyrenees last Monday. He sadly was found dead. Spanish authorities have said he's a 70-year-old man from London. And then there was a 44-year-old man who had died after being found in waters off the Greek island. That was last week as well. And as Mark said, maybe this is quite common where adventurous travellers go missing or have accidents abroad, and it's only been brought to our attention recently because of Michael Mosley. However, there does appear to be a spate of these incidents lately. Maybe something fishy is going on. Maybe it's part of a nefarious agenda to put people off travelling overseas. Or is it something more natural, like what David Polides talks about in his Missing 411 books? I'll certainly be keeping my eyes open for more stories like this. Thank you, Mark. We truly appreciate you. And as I say, it's July the 1st. And July the 1st, 1967, is the anniversary today of regular colour TV in Britain. Yes. And it's the start of the Wimbledon Championships today. And it was actually the Wimbledon Championships on July the 1st, 1967, which was the start of, as I say, regular colour TV on British television, which I think is really interesting. And so well done. Also well done to Wimbledon for not being idiots. And they have announced that they will not be going, they will not be joining the whole gender folly. They will still retain their ball boys and their ball girls, despite pressure to change them to ball kids. Ridiculous. Ball boys and ball girls have been at the Wimbledon Championship for absolutely years. The average age is 15 years old. Approximately 170 ball boys and ball girls are selected from about 750. And but in a usual year, there is a final total of approximately 250 ball boys and ball girls. Little known fact, by the way, Mariana Spring, the BBC's hapless misinformation reporter, used to be a Wimbledon ball girl, and she was even selected to give Queen Elizabeth a bouquet one year. I also asked you to send in your geoengineering pictures with dates and places, and you did not disappoint. Thank you. Lissa, Irene, Suzanne, Anita, Karen, Dawny. I'm loving your pictures. Well, not loving them, of course, but I'm loving being able to collate them. And Sean said, good morning to you, Sean. This trail proved to me that it's not just a normal reaction between aircraft engines and the atmosphere. I'm not certain if this is a trail end or a start of spraying. It's clearly something that is being turned on or off. Keep up the wonderful work, Sonia. Kind regards, Sean. Thank you, Sean. We appreciate that very, very much. We are just waiting to be joined by the former Conservative MP, Andrew Bridgen. And we have lots and lots of questions for him. I'm delighted that he agreed to come on. It is often my experience that MPs are quite reluctant to face me because I don't do a PR job. So, yeah, we're just waiting. Let's catch up with these comments while we are. The wizard's words, can't stand tennis. Morning all. Good morning, Ali. Will a dude in a skirt win women's tennis soon? David wants to know. And Paul says, are rainbow umbrellas banned from rainy Wimbledon? And Cavan is not impressed with the whole woke agenda. Oh, Pink says, my ex was a ball boy when he was a kid. And Notslas says, David Polides from Canam missing. 411 is an amazing person, spot on with missing cases. Good. And yes, what's this? It's just going so fast. I'm missing this. Right. Do you know what, Luke? I have to say that the trails were super heavy around here over Saturday as well. And then Sunday was all grey and overcast, absolutely miserable, horrible. And I'm just checking that Mr. Bridgen is on his way. Just checking. Right. Yes, it was absolutely horrendous over here as well. And as I say, yesterday was all grey and overcast. And it's not right, is it? London lady loves tennis. Do you? Christine says, I truly hope Andrew gets voted back in and reform don't deprive us of an MP standing for Vax injured. And Drumstick. Oh, what's that about Tarmacs? Been a ball boy. Wizards, you were a ball boy at an England game, were you? Years and years ago. And Jeanette says, hope AB is getting the help he needs for leaflet distribution. Saturday was bad in South Wales too. Yeah, really, really appalling around here and all over. I mean, I've been sent so many pictures now, and clearly, I mean, the thing is that it's hilarious, isn't it? Is that they expect us to ignore the evidence of our very own eyes, which is problematic, frankly. Right, let me just look at a few more other stories before we are joined by Andrew. And Glastonbury, that annual festival of rebellion that is stuffed to the gills with trust fund kids and famous lovers. So Banksy let loose an inflatable migrant boat onto crowds at Glastonbury during one performance, which was quite curious. And obviously people were not happy about that at all. And then there was, Pride on Saturday in London. I saw a woman walking my area. Andrew will be with us any second, I'm being informed. I saw a woman walking in my area, presumably returning from Pride. She had a small girl with her. I presumed it was her child, and she was carrying a placard which read, "Love is love." Actually, no, it's not. Right. Actually, no, it's not. We have to be really careful with that wording, and I have to be careful how I say this because I'm obviously on YouTube and they're really, really funny about this sort of thing. But that is a very problematic expression because love is not love. We must be very, very clear and very, very careful about that expression when it comes to children, because that sort of suggests that there are no boundaries and there must be boundaries. Also, Pride, by the way, was led by a straight woman this year. Attention seeker, Yasmin Beno, I don't know how to pronounce her second name. She showed up with hardly any clothes on, except for a bikini, fishnet, and chaps to tell us she is the first asexual person to lead Pride. So let me get this straight. She doesn't have sex, but she thinks that that is a cause for campaigning and activism. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Who cares? And no, Yasmin, honey, none of that matters. It really doesn't. These are luxury beliefs for overprivileged people. Trust me, if you were in a war zone, you would not even be thinking it's a thing to acknowledge. You need to toughen up. Toot sweet. So, of course, we have entered election week in the UK. So much going on around the world. Riots in France last night. I will be joined later by Tom Sullivan, who is going to be talking me through what has been going on. Really interesting stuff. But this is a massively big week in both the UK and in France and around the world. And here he is. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Well, Andrew, thank you for joining us. You're already braver than 99% of the MPs that I asked to join us this morning, because many say to me, well, send us the questions in advance and we'll consider it. I have to say, Andrew Bridgen did not ask me to do that. And that is already a good starting point. How are you feeling about this election, Andrew?
I'm invigorated. I love elections. It's my 5th general election. I've never lost one, and I'm not planning on losing one this week. The support I've got on the ground is unbelievable, and the love and the affection out there is, well, it's just invigorating. I've got 22 volunteers out this morning. I'll be meeting them in about 45 minutes, and then we'll separate off and go and hit various parts of the constituency to get the final get out the vote leaflet for the elections on Thursday.
Do you get a sense that things have changed? I know that people have been really, that very disenfranchised by politics. Many people are politically homeless, but there is a sense that the independents are coming through like never before. Am I right there or not?
Well, the party system has been corrupted. My message to the people in Northwest Leicestershire is you can either have an MP who represents a party in your constituency, or you can have an MP who represents you in Parliament. And only through having an independent can you get the latter. You can't have both anymore. The game of politics is played by politicians where they do what's in the interests of their party, and that is often in conflict with what's in the interests of their voters. And that's not my way.
I understand. So really, for many people, you've primarily come to prominence over the last few years, certainly since the COVID scenario. But the fact is, you've actually been outspoken for a very long time. You've been in Parliament since 2010, and you've been outspoken about a number of things, including the post office scandal, well before it was a headline grabber. And I mean, I'm in no doubt whatsoever that there are many descriptions that could be applied to you. Outspoken. You're also, in many people's eyes, controversial, but you're also a campaigning member of Parliament. And there are some things that I absolutely acknowledge that you've done brilliantly. And there are other things that I thought I have to ask Andrew about this. Let's ask him about this. So let's do it. First of all, you obviously there was the issue with the Conservative Party, and they expelled you in April 2023. How did you feel about that?
I knew they were out to get me. I spoke out on the vaccines on the 13th of December 2022. And what forced me to speak out was the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency were urging the government to authorise the experimental COVID-19 vaccines for healthy children from the age of 5 down to 6 months. A group of people who were at absolutely minuscule risk from COVID-19 itself, but who would be vulnerable to at least 1 in 800 serious adverse events resulting from vaccination. And I just couldn't sit idly by and let that happen. I knew that there would be serious repercussions for me, but I also knew that by standing up and giving them the science, that I could win that argument, that even the most pro-vax of individuals could be persuaded with the science that the cost benefit to those small children, it wasn't there. And you can't be in a society where we're willing to sacrifice healthy children to protect adults. That's no. A sick society. That's not.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Go along with. And you shouldn't really, you can't really treat anybody with a medication to protect someone else.
Yeah.
That's immoral.
I hear you. I just want to say, not that you need reminding, but of course, we're live streaming on YouTube. I don't need to tell you about the problems on YouTube regarding this, regarding censorship. In fact, Andrew, I got my first strike on YouTube by reporting on your excess deaths debate in Parliament. So you were a representative of the people, a nominated member of Parliament that I was reporting on in YouTube, and I got my first strikes. That tells you how totalitarian it is. Very difficult around here, obviously.
Well, YouTube took my speeches down for about a week, but I think there were 4.2 million complaints and they had to put them back up again. But what I would finish off the issue around speaking out to start with in December 2022, yeah, I've paid a price for that. But the prize was that UK is one of only 2 countries in Europe that didn't jab down to 6 months because the government daren't after I put it on the record.
So are we not still, though? Because there is a confusion about that. We've had so many questions for you, Andrew. We're not going to be able to get through them. But there's a confusion about that. Are we not still jabbing babies? And I say this because one of the questions I received was from Trauma into Truth, saying, could you ask him why he's continuously stated that babies in the UK weren't jabbed? All babies on the Learning Disability Register were recommended. What do you think about that?
Well, they did make an exception. They said that the vulnerable people. I also spoke out in March 2023, quoting the government's own data with regard to the safety and efficacy of the booster campaign, pointing out that according to the government's own data, in the healthy 40 to 49-year cohort, you'd have to boost, according to the government's own data, over 900,000 individuals to keep one person from presenting in hospital, not intensive care, with COVID-19. And that given the serious adverse event rate of at least 1 in 800, you'd be putting 1,150 people into hospital or risking death just to stop one person presenting with COVID-19 in hospital. I'm pleased to say that, again, although that speech was dismissed and not reported in the media, within 3 weeks, the government lifted the minimum age for the booster program that spring to 75, but also included, again, the immunosuppressed and those with comorbidities, actually the last people who should be taking these experimental vaccines.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I always worry about it because they sort of tend to talk out of both sides of their mouth. They tell us this and they do this. So let's start working through some of these questions.
Well, let's come back on those figures that were shocking. Even in the over 75s with comorbidities, the most vulnerable group that the government data covered, the over 75 with comorbidities, you had to vaccinate with the booster 800 of them to keep one out of hospital, which is exactly the same rate as the serious adverse event rate. So all they were doing was swapping the risk of presenting in hospital with COVID-19 against the risk of having a severe adverse event. There was no benefit even for the most vulnerable cohort.
Right. Right. So, Andrew, obviously, you have a very large following. Many people support you. You should see some of the comments. People are absolutely delighted that you're here, but you also have your critics. You're a politician. You would not be a politician if you didn't have your critics. And obviously, what you originally supported lockdown and C-19 measures. I remember seeing a picture of you actually getting the booster. I think you're jab damaged, actually. And some people are still angry with you because you voted repeatedly for those C-19 measures and you promoted the jab. What do you say to them now in terms of where you're at?
I think the first lockdown was acceptable. Nobody knew what was going on around the world, but my skepticism grew, and the gap between the government's response or Parliament's response, because all the parties had bought into all of this. Indeed, the opposition parties wanted longer lockdowns and more mandates. And I analysed the data. I actually was, they call me an anti-vaxxer, but I mean, I'm double vaccinated with AstraZeneca, and I suffered some severe, and still suffering some severe side effects from those vaccinations. And what I saw was questionable. I mean, my skepticism around the lockdowns, I was seeing more suicides in a month during lockdown in my constituency, which is a very happy place to live with the highest economic growth in the country. in 1 month than we would normally expect in a year. And the government were denying that the lockdowns were causing mental health problems and suicides. We're now in a situation where we did have 1 million under 25s on waiting lists for mental health support following the lockdowns. And what I saw was that scientists, respected scientists, doctors who spoke out and raised any concerns about the government methodology for dealing with the so-called pandemic were absolutely crucified. They were vilified. They were smeared in the newspapers. So I knew what was coming when I was going to speak out, and I wanted to speak out when I could actually make a difference, and that's when I did. And I'll tell you as well at this stage, I mean, I canvassed support from colleagues within the Conservative Party and across Parliament to help me stop the vaccination of those small children. And I was disappointed. I mean, when colleagues will admit to you that they had 2 micro heart attacks after the second Pfizer jab,
wow,
and still wouldn't speak out. When colleagues tell you that their very close relatives have taken the Moderna booster and are now paralysed from the neck down and won't speak out. I mean, we're supposed to be able to speak in Parliament without fear or favour.
Right.
I can tell you there's a lot of fear.
Yes.
And there's a lot of favour.
Yes, I agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more.
Well, right, I was offered in January 22, I was offered anything I wanted to stop talking about, because I'd spoken out against Plan B.
Who offered you that, Andrew?
It was a very senior figure in Number 10. Offered me anything I wanted, not to shut up. And I said, I've never had an offer like that before. And I said, well, what does that mean? They said, well, you have to tell us what you want and we get it for you. I said, so anything I want? And they said, well, pretty much. I said, well, if we're playing that game, then I think I want the Prime Minister's resignation letter. Can I have it?
Wow.
They said I couldn't.
See, it's mad, isn't it? So look, we've got so little time with you and yet so many questions. It's absolutely insane. So obviously, out of the Conservatives, and then you went to Lawrence Fox's Reclaim Party, which you stayed only for a matter of months and then left to go independent. Why did you leave?
We disagreed on the policies moving forward. We agreed on many things, but I mean, it's a very small organisation and it's centred around Lawrence Fox and what he does. It was incompatible with getting re-elected in Northwest Leicestershire. I needed to concentrate on my campaign, and I couldn't be in London sorting out all the problems in the Reclaim Party.
I think that's a fair point. I take that wholeheartedly. Right. The other thing that I must address with you is you've been given a series of interviews to Resistance GB in which you've made some startling claims. And the reason I'm prompted to say that is because obviously you've just talked about somebody very senior who was essentially trying to blackmail you. And what you've been talking about is you've been talking about these very serious trafficking claims. You say, you know, the people who are doing it, when these adults and children are being brought in, these children are being taken off, pictures are being taken of them, these are being distributed obviously to child abusers, etc., etc. Andrew, you know as well as I do, something has to be done about this, but you're telling us in these interviews that you've taken this to government and they're not interested, right?
Yes, I've passed it to senior figures in the government who've acknowledged their receipt of it. Nothing's happened. It's gone to the National Crime Agency, it's gone to MI5. There's no action being taken.
What are you going to do now, though? Obviously, because we can't just leave it hanging in the air, because for every minute, presumably, that we're leaving it just like this, that's more people being trafficked. So where now?
Well, I need to get back into the chamber of the House of Commons to be able to speak truth to power. And the sooner I can get back in there, the sooner we can shed some light on this. But this, obviously, they knew, obviously, when I sent the paperwork in with the names and the whole organisation, the companies who are laundering the money and how it's being organised, even down to the names of the people on the ground, who are mainly Albanian mafia who are doing the legwork. They know that I know, and that just has made them far more determined to get me out of Parliament.
if you get back in, which I strongly suspect you will you be using parliamentary privilege to name the senior members in government who you've taken this to?
Yes, and I suspect that many of them won't be in government after the election. But that doesn't, I mean, you know, it's shocked me how many colleagues have decided not to stand. And I think many of them think that they're running away from their responsibilities when they were in office. Well, there's not going to be anywhere to run, quite honestly. The world's a small place.
It is indeed, and getting smaller with globalization.
Well, unless those who've committed, and I do believe there's crimes against humanity, unless they're held to account publicly with strong sanctions against them.
Right.
What is ever going to be to dissuade anyone from ever doing this again? And when we've won this, and when we've got this sorted, I do not want to be in a position where this can ever be inflicted upon the people ever again.
Andrew, I mean, I don't need to tell you, but there's a lot of questions here saying, why won't he name them now? Why doesn't he expose the names publicly? Explain to people why you're not doing it at the moment.
Because I would be leaving myself open, which they'd love me to a legal attack. And the campaign of cover-up will start immediately, because, you know, this is one of the most sensitive issues, child trafficking, that there is, and they will defend it to the last moment, just like they defended the post office scandal, just like they defended my exposing of the modern slavery in the garment industry, the fast fashion industry in Leicester, where thousands of people were being paid £3, £2.50 an hour, in living in appalling conditions with no health and safety. They've done it before. The playbook's all there, and we're seeing it now being played out over COVID-19. It's like a tug of war, and we're pulling on the rope, and they're giving us inch by inch of the rope. We know we're going to get it, but as Sonia, as they said to me before they threw me out of the Conservative Party, when I explained all my concerns back in January 2023 to the party about the vaccines, and also about the midazolam and morphine, the NG, NICE guideline 163, and its use, which I believe led to the euthanization of thousands, tens of thousands of vulnerable elderly out of our hospitals. They said to me at the end of my presentation, you know, Andrew, there is currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may well be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world, with all the personal risk for you which that will entail. What I can tell you is that all the documents I sent to the government are held in various places, and if anything were to happen to me, they will be made public.
Let me read you this. 80% Scottish says, so if Andrew doesn't win his seat, he won't do anything about it. That's not what you're saying, Andrew, right? So just in the event that you didn't win your seat, so obviously, because our viewers are deeply concerned about what you're saying about trafficking, as indeed am I. So in the event that you didn't win your seat, which I think is highly unlikely, but in the event you didn't, what then to do with this trafficking?
Well, I'm going to have to carry on campaigning on the issues that are important to me. And I will have to continue to shed light. It's just going to be far, far harder than it is now. I'm cancelled from the mainstream media from the moment I spoke out about the vaccines.
Yeah.
That seat in the House of Commons and parliamentary privilege is an ability to bring light into the darkness. And I'm fighting very hard for the next 4 days to ensure that that voice for the people stays in our parliament. And I'm going to be relying on the good people of Northwest Leicestershire. They've always seen right for the last 4 elections, and I believe they will come to the right decision at this election as well. And
I think you're in a very difficult situation on an almost constant basis, not least because you're so isolated in Parliament. So that obviously comes with its own problems. I mean,
it does,
yeah.
But you see, I might be isolated from the politicians who don't want me raising the questions,
but not from the public.
They see me as a problem because they'll come up to me and say, why do you keep talking about vaccine harms, excess deaths, or the WHO, or the net zero, because then they get traffic because their constituents are interested, and they get them asking them questions, and they don't want to discuss any of these issues. So they blame me for raising them, and they think that if I wasn't there, they just wouldn't get these emails in from their constituents. And as far as isolated is concerned, what your viewers have to remember is that there are a lot of real people who work in Parliament who aren't politicians or members of the House of Lords. They're the cooks and the cleaners, the clerks, the doorkeepers, they're the security guards and the police. And over the last 2 years, 80% of those are with me. So I'm not isolated. And listen, when I walk out.
And I've seen, the thing is, I've actually seen you flourish through this, through being that outsider. I've seen that happen, no doubt about it. Great comments coming in, incredible viewing that we've got going on here. Thank you so much for all these comments. I know we're not going to cover them all. We're doing the best we can. EA Audit said, saw your speech, one of the greatest in Parliament he's ever seen. Andrew, some people are worried about undue influence around Parliament. And one thing that always comes up is the issue of Freemasonry. I have to ask you directly, are you a Freemason?
No, I'm not. I was asked 3 times, but I haven't been asked for more than 20 years. I always refused. I've never got involved. I know there are some very good people involved. Some of my friends have been involved in Freemasonry at a low level, and they're very good people. But I never wanted to get involved, and I always said, look, I've got aspirations and I've got drive to get somewhere in life, and I never want anyone saying he only got there because he's a Freemason. So I've never joined the Free. I've never been to a meeting.
Right. Thank you for, I mean, the thing is that what you're striking me as this morning, and what you're striking our viewers as, is somebody who's just like honestly, straightforwardly responding to these questions. And we really appreciate that. So I think last week or the week before, you had a victory in the High Court. And as someone who's in the High Court, I know how hard that can be, but you did have a victory. And the judge ruled that what Matthew Hancock, the former health secretary, that tweet he had made about you actually was in common law defamatory, because he was essentially calling you, saying that you were anti-Semitic, when in fact you were quoting a doctor. Andrew, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I was retweeting a paper from Dr. Josh Getchko of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, who is a Jewish gentleman. And he had told me that a senior cardiologist had told him that the rollout of the vaccines was the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust. And I was neither diminishing the Holocaust or denying it. Indeed, I was saying that the Holocaust was the worst crime against humanity. But I was saying that the rollout of the vaccine is probably the second largest. You can read into whatever you want. There's lots of Holocaust survivors who've come to my defence and written very supportive letters, which will be read out in court in due course. But it's interesting, it's taken me 18 months to get Hancock. He still has not put a defence in. He's never put in.
I found that astonishing.
He's never put a defence in. And one thing he can't do now is, at this stage, given all his statements, he can't put a defence in that what he was saying was the truth.
Right.
That means that he knows that what he said isn't true. He also said, I was an anti-vax, anti-scientific, racist, anti-Semite. Well, I mean, anti-vax. I'm double vaccinated and vaccine harmed, so how can I be anti-vax? Anti-scientific. Well, he's got a degree from Oxford in PPE, and I've got a degree from Nottingham University in biological sciences with biochemistry, specialising in genetics, virology, and behaviour.
Right.
Who's the scientist?
Yes.
And I'm no racist, and I'm not anti-Semitic. I've spoken in the last 12 months in 2 synagogues where I've been invited to come in and speak. And I was invited to fly out and address the Knesset in Israel. But because of the elections, I wasn't able to go.
Right. I mean, it is interesting. I was going through your voting record, the questions and issues that you've raised in Parliament, extensive. You've raised issues around the CAS review, around gender, around Palestine and Israel, around food and farming, around illegal migration. All of these are issues that are bothering the British public. What do you consider are the main issues that you need to stand on?
Well, we need to we need to stop the illegal migration. It can be stopped. There is just no political will to do so, and all the stuff around the deeply flawed Rwanda bill. One of the reasons that Rishi Sunak's called this general election is because it's going to be apparent by November that no one's going to. You and I have got more chance of going to Rwanda than an illegal migrant. It was never ever going to succeed. The lawyers will have a field day as always. And there won't be any planes going to Rwanda. So that's another reason why he had to. This can be sorted. You know, the analogy I always use is if we were members of a working men's or club or sport, and we arrived on Monday morning and someone had broken in over the weekend, was sitting eating the peanuts and said, "I want to be a member of your club, so I've broken in, and I want you to have a whip round for my membership fee." And I don't think they'd be getting a membership, do you?
Right. No, I don't.
We'd be ringing the police, arresting them and taking them away. There's a clue in the question. Illegal migration. They are illegal. They've broken the law. And I insisted they put into the immigration bill that anyone who commits a crime in entering the country can never have a British passport. And I thought that would be some deterrent, that if you come in illegally, and also what you're doing by coming in that method is you're making a mockery of our legal migration system and the people who play the game properly. I mean, what's the incentive for anyone through legal means to come to our country when you could just jump in a rubber boat and cross the channel? So the illegal migration is very annoying, especially when, I had 2 hotels. The government thought they were being clever. There are 7 constituencies in Leicestershire. They stuck 51%, more than half of all the illegal migrants in hotels in my constituency.
Wow.
I've got them all cleared out. I've got them all shut down by pressurising the government. But they've gone somewhere. They're now being put into houses, I believe, the ones that the government bought at very low prices through the HS2 compensation scheme, and also houses of people who are having their houses repossessed. So they haven't gone anywhere. They're still here. They're just not visibly congregating in these hotels. We need to deal with this issue because it really irks the average decent working person. And when we've got veterans and their families who've got nowhere to call home, but we can house migrants in 4-star hotels, the best hotels in northwest Leicestershire.
Yes, mad. Absolutely mad. Andrew,
anyone thinks that's going to be a disincentive. We need to get back to producing food on our farms, and we're a country of 66 million people that only produces 55% of the food.
Right.
We're being pushed into a war with Russia.
Yeah.
For nefarious reasons. War, it feeds the super rich and it buries the poor, and it's always been that way. It's not in the interest of us to pick a fight with a superpower. We believe in nuclear deterrence. It's why we maintain our nuclear fleet of Trident submarines, and we have 200-ish warheads. We're picking a fight with a superpower with 6,000 nuclear warheads. If we really believe in nuclear deterrent, we should be negotiating now to de-escalate the situation, not constantly increasing it. So we need to negotiate that. We need to end the bloodshed and the death in Gaza, and that's another running sore on humanity that we need to be dealing with. And at the same time as the government are telling us that we've got to prepare for conscription and national service, and then they're putting all the signs out there. And Germany and France have already passed the enabling legislation. They can announce it tomorrow.
Yes. Yes.
And we've shut the last steelworks in the country that makes weapons grade steel. And we're stopping our farmers from growing food. This is the politics that just don't, the policies that just don't add up at all. And these, people need to look at this. Net zero is economic madness of a policy which is going to make our people poorer, colder, and less free. It's a control mechanism. At the same time as India, China, Russia, Malaysia are opening new coal-fired power stations every week. China's increasing its carbon dioxide emissions, if you believe that carbon dioxide is the cause of any global warming. I'll point that scientifically the link between carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but its relationship with temperature is not linear, i.e. as carbon dioxide levels go up. It is, it's logarithmic. And
Yes.
90% of the warming effect of carbon dioxide is felt at 300 parts per million. We're at
Right.
420, which is, to put in perspective, that's less than a tenth of 1/2 of 1% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. And at 0.2% in the atmosphere, anything below that, all the plants would die and we'd be gone in 3 months.
Right. Andrew, I know I've got to let you go. I can't believe how many questions we've got coming in. So many, so much support for you. June says, go, Andrew, truly honourable man. So, OMG, a Tory that I have a lot in common with, says Annie. Well, actually, he's not strictly a Tory anymore, Annie.
I've never been a Tory. I was a Conservative. I was never a Tory. It's
a distinction, an absolute distinction. Andrew, just reflecting back, just on your parliamentary career, is there anything that you feel that you should have done differently?
Well, I was always classed as a rebel when I was voting against 2% of the government 2% of the time. Looking back, I should have voted against my own government more often.
Fair point. Annie said, please ask him back. We will indeed after the election when he's won again. And silence is golden says, I wish you were my MP, Andrew, one of the very few with integrity in politics. Keep up the fight. The people are listening. And Miss Jenks says, huge respect for Andrew, the most hardworking MP in the country. And there you go, Andrew. I really appreciate you joining us, being very straightforward and prepared to answer the questions. And as I say, not asking me for a list of questions, which is fantastic. Everybody, this is Andrew Bridgen, and he is running for independent in Leicester Northwest this week. Take good care of yourself, Andrew. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Northwest Leicestershire.
North, as opposed to, what did I say?
Leicester Northwest. Ooh. It's Leicestershire.
Shame on me. Shame on me, everybody. This is Andrew Bridgen. Take good care of yourself, Andrew. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you. We'll speak to you soon, Andrew, and we'll go in deep on another platform where we can really let loose. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Excellent. Thank you. Right. That was excellent. How are you all doing out there? Thank you, Stella. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Cool man, says Hugh. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to agree with him. No, absolutely not. Why should they? It's not that kind of world. But I have to say, and also, Aaron, thank you for organising Andrew to come on this morning. And I have to say, you know, kudos to Andrew, because I have been an outspoken critic of his, and he was prepared to come on here live with not a clue about what I was going to ask him. So more power to his elbow, frankly, on that. I can really dig that sort of thing. Let's keep this moving on, people. This is brilliant. We're loving this today. You're cold. Who's cold? Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate that. Here's Tom with us. Good morning, Tom Sullivan.
Morning, Sonia. Lovely to see you.
We've just been talking with Andrew Bridgen. What was great is often when I invite MPs onto this live stream, they're like, yeah, can you send us a list of questions in advance? Which is obviously what they do oftentimes in legacy media. Well, we don't run it round like this. But Andrew was one of the first MPs not to ask me to do that. So even though I've been an outspoken critic of Andrew Bridgen, I immediately had to give him some respect for that, because respect where it's due. You didn't ask me to do what 99.9% of other MPs do. So, but he was very honest, very forthright. We've got a very busy live stream this morning, Tom, but I am delighted you've joined us this morning. Tom is a broadcast journalist, and Tom is going to go through the sort of runners and riders of what's happening on the political stage at the moment. Tom, talk to us about France. I'm looking at images here. There were riots in France last night. Talk to us about what's going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's very French. I have to say, Sonia, I do like the fact that in this country we don't have a culture of, you know, the party I didn't vote for won the election, therefore I'm going to not only go out and protest but burn things and stuff like that. You know, it's very French, each to their own. I am kind of glad we don't have that. Marine Le Pen's party won just over 30% of the vote. So 33% to be exact. So in French terms, because they do have so many parties and they have the round system, etc., that is the equivalent to a landslide. So, it's very interesting. It's a movement which has been built up over many years. And, France in many ways has much deeper problems than we have. However, I do have to say, I think this is a positive development. And even though I wouldn't vote for the French version of the Corbynistas or whatever, at least in France, you have a genuine right wing grouping, you have a genuine left wing grouping, and you have a genuine globalist uniparty. They came third, they did a distant third. But in a way, you have three different groupings that genuinely have different visions. And I hope after this election and the next one in a few years' time, we might be able to move to that type of position, hopefully without, setting central London on fire.
It's really interesting, these developments. I think this is an election like none that I've seen, certainly not in recent years. And that is, we are seeing the rise of what they like to call the far right. But in fact, this, what they call far right, are people who are standing up for their own countries, right? And that's really what we're dealing with. We're seeing it here, we're seeing it in France, we're seeing it in Belgium, we're seeing it all over, right? So this, but ultimately in France, this is a humiliation for Macron and his globalist handlers, isn't it?
100%. And when he called the election in response to Le Pen's party again coming first, and a very strong first in the European Parliament elections, we were all thinking here in the office, like, what could the logic possibly be? There were unnamed French sources saying that it's, to make the threat of the far right real, and then failing that, let them, have a few years in government, and naturally they will be terrible, and therefore that will kind of give people a taste of, look how bad they actually are, and they can't use that card of we've never been tried. But none of that seems to add up. I do have to say, their second round voting thing, it's not just for the presidential elections, for the parliamentary elections as well. So even in an individual French constituency, if you don't get over 50%, which almost never happens, especially when you have more than two parties. I mean, even for us, it never happens. Then it goes to the second round, which is going to happen, I can't remember, in a week or two's time. So, there might be a theory that now people will step down, and it's going to be something like in Scotland, whoever can beat the nationalists, so whoever can beat the far right. Sonia, I find this term hilarious.
Well, it is. It has no meaning. It is
No.
absolutely it's as meaningless now as calling somebody a bigot or a racist. It's absolutely meaningless because it's been overused, right? So yeah.
Sorry. And if you think of the logic of the political spectrum, which, I have problems with that in itself, because someone said to me in the office today, "Oh, you're far right, aren't you?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Yes, I love goose stepping in the shower." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I have some positions which are, traditionally labeled left, and I have some traditions that are traditionally labeled right. But if the logic of the political spectrum is the far right is the thing which is on the very furthest edge of the center right, which itself is on the right of the center, and you go to the center left and the far left or whatever. So if you're Maloney and you're in government, if you're Le Pen and you're about to lead a government, if you're, Geert Wilders and you come first in elections, or whatever it is, can you really be far right if you have actually...
I hear you.
The center right? Do you see what I mean? So
absolutely,
words kind of lose their meaning. And why do we never speak about far left?
We never speak about far left. You're absolutely, all of this is excellent points. And here's the thing: what's also interesting, Tom, is you, like me, had become completely disenfranchised with the political system, politically homeless. And you said to me yesterday, I honestly wasn't going to vote and had so much despair, but now I will vote. What has changed you, Tom?
I will vote. I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I was always, I wrote an article about this week, so the points are kind of fresh in my mind. I was always interested in politics. From the age of 16, I was in political, societies at university. I'd always argue with all the smelly, unwashed lefties at the hipster cafe. I remember I used to go in kind of on purpose with my shirt tucked in and my Telegraph and my Spectator, and I'd sit there and all the hipsters would look at me and go, who's he? Someone told me to stop reading the fascist Spectator once, which I found interesting. But I was always interested in politics. I campaigned, always voted in every election. I took part in Brexit. And then when the pandemic happened, Sonia, I just thought, how did I ever believe in the silent majority, in the common sense of the common man, because what I saw was that actually, yeah, the majority was silent, but in a very bad way. They were silent to the totalitarianism,
Absolutely,
brought in on absolute lies and propaganda. And then when the Ukraine thing started, I was caught off guard at the beginning, but once the dust had settled, actually it had been coming for a decade at least. And I'd have to say this to you, but I will say it just for anyone listening. It doesn't mean that you support Putin to say that getting involved, heavily involved politically, militarily for a long time in a very complicated part of the world, right on the border of a country with a very terrible history that we were, in a Cold War with for half of a century, which has the most nuclear weapons in the entire world, is not going to end well. And on that point, Sonia, Nigel Farage's return to the fray, it did energize me. And the thing which has clinched it for me, when he came back, I said, you know what? I will vote for Nigel Farage, if not just to give the Tories a bloody nose. But then when he stuck his neck above the parapet and not only spoke about Ukraine, but tied it into the Tory and Labour failed wars in the Middle East. I mean, Nigel Farage standing there and saying to, Tory boomer Middle England, which is not, usually the type of crowd to be interested in this. But he said there was no ISIS and there were no channel crossings and med crossings and migrant boats before David Cameron and friends destroyed the Libyan government with their intervention and also funded Islamic terrorists, essentially, covertly in Syria, talking about our disastrous foreign policy and then tying it into Ukraine and tying it all together. And then when they attacked him on that, Sonia, when they smelt blood, he not only doubled down, but he explained his position. And that's what happened in Brexit. There was not a majority for Brexit until the argument was made. And suddenly I thought, do you know what? Actually, we just can't expect everyone to think exactly like we do. You have to take
there is
people.
a purity spiral, isn't there?
Yes.
That is the problem when it comes to
I
politics.
agree.
It's like we demand that we agree with every single thing that a politician stands for. And Andrew Bridgen is a perfect example because obviously people are very divided. He can be quite a divisive character, but there's a whole load of people on here this morning who absolutely love and adore him and support him. But the truth is that we are caught in a purity spiral and you have to be careful about that. But here's the thing, Tom, some people are deeply concerned that Farage is really just a part of the establishment and we're just going to get establishment 2.0 if we get him in. What do you think about that?
What I would say is purity spirals get you absolutely nowhere.
Fact.
Right. And if we can get a party which says we provoked the Ukraine war, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and all our foreign policies is a disaster. Mass immigration is changing this country. We have deep structural problems. We need cheap energy with mini nuclear reactors. The list goes on and on and on. If we elect a party which, even if they're just saying that, does it actually matter if we can move the dial and shift the Overton window and get these as discussions and force the mainstream media to discuss these points and force these points to be discussed in Parliament?
Fair point.
If we say, purity spiral, oh, I don't trust him, it's just the establishment, blah, 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 whatever it is, do you know what? We will get nowhere in the real world. And I actually think I've changed my position. I got into the purity spiral, but I've taken myself out of it. And I think, we have to do everything we can to take people with us and move the direction and change the direction to a way we want it to be. So I will be voting for the Reform Party for those reasons, not because I think that, they're going to 100% take on the establishment, because I like what they're talking about. And I like the fact that they're introducing these things into the conversation, which can only be a good thing, Sonia.
It's a good point. Now, what about this issue of Russian interference? And I mean, what you said to me is like nothing has changed since 2016. I mean, that's so true, isn't it? So there are accusations, obviously, of Russian interference. And I think what's really insane is that there's lots of interference going on. Some people could argue that this election is directly influenced by both Israel in terms of the sheer volume of globalists in Labour and Conservatives, and by Palestine, hence the success of George Galloway's party, whose popularity is almost exclusively based on Galloway's support of Palestine. So there's lots of interference. But in part, Tom, isn't that a problem? Isn't it that many British people are left wondering who is representing me?
Well, yeah, just on the point of George Galloway, I completely understand, people on the right who say, this is sectarian politics and, the Muslim vote, and we shouldn't have this. What I would say is, I respect George Galloway's position because he says, I'm a lifelong anti-racist, and but at the same time, I'm against mass immigration. So what he says, if you push him, he says, and you don't have to push him too hard, you just have to ask him. But and I have asked him, and what he says, Sonia, is I'm against mass immigration, okay? But the people we've invited here, we've invited them. And once they're born here and their children are born here and their grandchildren are born here, I don't want to have any racism in our country, but that doesn't mean that I want to add to the masses that we've already brought. So for me, that is an integrationist understanding
Right.
of controlling immigration, not dissimilar rather at all to the reform position if you actually, separate the rhetoric from the actual policies. And what I have to say is, if we're talking about certain groups and not integrating in our society, yes, the Muslim community feels that their fellow Muslims are being oppressed. It would be great if we as Europeans, felt the same thing about Christians in the Middle East or Europeans in Africa also being oppressed. I kind of admire that in a way. And secondly, I would say it's a much better thing to bring these groups into politics and get them participating in our democratic system. And under a leader like George Galloway, who is a practicing Catholic, who is a British patriot, who is a unionist, who is against the globalists, who has, like Nigel Farage, repented on their initial support for, the biomedical tyranny that they both supported in its early days, when, let's admit, the best of us were thrown off guard. And yeah, I think, again, anything, Sonia, which is a vote against the Uniparty must be a good thing. I was saying to someone earlier this morning that, the warnings of a supermajority. We have a supermajority. It's a uniparty supermajority.
Yes.
Labour, Lib Dems, Tory,
Yes.
SNP, Green,
Right.
Cymru. That is a uniparty supermajority. So
Right.
all warnings of it. And funnily, sorry, Sonia, just some rambling.
No, I love it. You're very passionate about it. Go on.
Sunak has warned that Putin wants a Labour victory. He said Vladimir Putin is hoping for a Starmer victory. This is ridiculous. This whole obsession with Russia.
Yeah.
I think it's, psychotic. I think Freud would have a lot to say about it.
Yes.
If he was around today.
Russia derangement syndrome, isn't it?
Yes.
Tom, before you leave us today, I know we don't have crystal balls around here, but the polls are fairly decisive in some respects. What do you think is going to happen on Thursday regarding the British elections?
I have absolutely no idea.
Ooh.
And I think predictions are a fool's game. I don't look at the polls too much. I don't think it's wrong to say the polls are all lies and whatever, but I do think, as the saying goes, the only poll that matters is the one on voting day. But my personal experience is that many people have said it. There is something happening there. I can even say it. There's something happening out there, Sonia. I do believe that. And, it remains to be seen, but I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping, I can't predict something, but what I hope is that everyone will be shocked like they were in 2016 with Brexit and Trump. I really hope that is the case. But if it's not, the main thing for me will be, can we kill the Conservative Party? Because that is the first step. And I think the reform strategy of saying Labour are going to win, the election's over, the question is, who do you want to be in opposition? And that's a very, very powerful argument, much more powerful, I think, than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, got you. Tom, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm actually looking forward to it. I keep saying I hate politics, but I also love seeing people get a bloody nose because I'm kind of twisted that way. Right, listen, Tom, take good care of yourself. Brilliant having you with us, everybody.
Thanks,
Tom
Sonia.
Sullivan, journalist. Speak to you soon, Tom. Take care. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant. Right. So this is one of those mornings, people. So I just thought that we'd sort of do back to back on our own election special, our own wake up election special. I'm going to bring in two members from the Party of Women, and then we will look at our news. Okay. Let's do that right now. And very busy morning around here. Greetings from Holy Russia. This is absolutely fascinating, honestly. Powerful. It is going to be an honest voting system, ? Can we clear out the house of lies and put real people in? Says Shug. Wouldn't that be fabulous? Wouldn't that genuinely be fabulous? I think we're all so sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I remain as cynical as ever about the voting system. But I still think it's really important to hear what other people have to say. We are just waiting for our lovely people to connect. Let me just see if I can find them on here. How are you doing there? It's a very busy morning on the stream, which is fabulous. We love that, of course. Oh, there we go. I think I've got Bernadette on the screen. There she is. Good morning, Bernadette.
Morning.
Lovely to have you. And I have Lesley as well. Everybody, this is Bernadette O'Malley, Lesley Woodburn. Both of them are candidates from the Party of Women. You may or may not know it. Started by Kelly Jane Minshaw Keane, rather. I'm getting that backwards. AKA Posy Parker. Posy Parker, of course, come out loud and strong and a brilliant, brilliant campaigner. I don't always agree with everything she says, but she's a brilliant activist and a brilliant campaigner on this issue. And the Party of Women is a single party issue, isn't it? So let's talk about this. Obviously, bearing in mind we're on YouTube. We know the problems with YouTube and what they deem hate speech and everything. But it's very simple what you're looking to do. So Lesley, let's start with you, right? You are a candidate for Islington. Is it Islington South?
Islington South and Finsbury. Yes, I'm a Party of Women candidate for Islington South and Finsbury. We shared a borough with Islington North.
Now, I know you. You're a long-term activist. You're somebody who's always walked the talk, and which is why one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, because I thought you definitely deserve a place in terms of politics, and I know where your heart is at as well. What attracted you to standing for the Party of Women?
Basically, because there's been a massive attack on women's rights. This attack comes in the form of our female-only spaces being handed over to men. Basically, the attacks come in in our sport, whereby female sport is no longer the preserve of females. Males want to in on female sport. On our NHS wards, we're not safe as females. In fact, if you're on a female NHS ward, you could be likely sharing that ward with a man who knows that he's a man, but wants you to compel him to he wants to compel you to call him a woman.
Yes,
because he reverts to a regressive stereotype of what a woman is.
And that is really what we're
attack.
That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with regressive stereotypes, compelled speech, and all manner of things which are thoroughly unsavoury in our society. Bernadette, you're standing in Southwest Hertfordshire constituency.
Right.
So what is interesting, of course, and I think you're going to get some backing for this, is that what the party has now been committed to revoking the Gender Recognition Act of 2004. Tell our viewers what the GRA is.
So in 2004, you couldn't have same-sex marriage. And I know it's difficult to believe because it's just so normal now. It's not even anything we think about. But in 2004, you couldn't have same-sex marriage. So the Gender Recognition Act created a condition where a man could or a woman could get a certificate which would say that for a number of purposes they could be treated as the opposite sex and therefore get married. And the need for that is no longer around. And there was a lot of debate about what could happen if this was allowed to go through. Most of it was ignored, I have to say. There were a few things that were kind of tweaked out that which I really do feel show that this is quite the people who were thinking it through. So if you think in the Lords they thought it through, in the Commons they thought it through, the one thing that is in the Act that is really clear and that is written out explicitly is the way inheritance works.
Yeah.
So if you are an older girl,
Primogeniture.
you wouldn't inherit, and you decide to become, you want people to believe you're a man, then you can't inherit. So these were issues that those people who were discussing it actually knew about and thought about. The issues of rape crisis centres, women's in prisons, all these spaces, areas of society where single sex is actually very relevant for women's and children's safety were dismissed as not important. They did also talk about the what would happen if there was already a marriage, and this has been quite badly misrepresented as the spouse's veto.
Yes.
Which anyone who has had a contract, if you've bought a sofa and you have a contract, nobody's allowed to change the contract without you agreeing to that.
Fair point.
And that is all this is saying, is that,
Yes,
that whoever it is that's still in the marriage that they agreed to on that contract, they have a bit of time to go, yes, let's go for it, I'm happy, or no, I want to come out of that contract.
yes,
Not the contract I signed.
yes.
You know, I just don't understand why
It's the trans widows, isn't it, who have just been dumped on terribly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, here's what's interesting. Obviously, Party of Women is a relatively new party. I mean, standing 5 candidates in the 2024 local elections, but you're now up to standing 16 candidates in England for this general election, which is excellent. It's very well done. Lesley, you obviously had at Hustings recently. What's going on out there? How are people reacting to where you're coming from?
In Islington South, on the streets, it's absolutely been brilliant. You know, basically, people are coming up to us with their concerns around this issue, and it concerns their daughter's safety at school. It concerns their space at school being handed over to boys who are equally uncomfortable with that as well, by the way. You know, the general discussion of the concerns of Party of Women as well. We've got people on the streets, dads, basically saying that for the slightest infraction, their daughter's not speaking to them for months and months on end because they are completely consumed with this gender ideology, which is a top-down ideology in the schools, presence in the schools, and is, you know, warping the minds of a lot of young people. And parents are really concerned about this. Relatives are really concerned. Communities are really concerned about this. Just conversations around the gyms, which is what we've been concentrating on in Islington, going around the gyms and outside supermarkets and so on. The word on the ground is people are fed up. People are fed up of having to keep their mouths shut at work.
Yes.
People are fed up of having to comply with this nonsense and so on. And people really are receptive to our ideas as the Party of Women.
Yeah, and see, that's interesting. So we have a commenter saying, Lesley, are you campaigning against the family court's discriminatory practices against men? Did you not hear the title of the party? Beyond Belief. It's Party of Women, and it's for a very particular reason, and that is for at least since the GRA, and I've only been aware of it since like 2017, and that is there has been an outright attack on women and children, and we don't actually have any real political parties who are standing up for them. So that is what's needed. That is exactly why this party is formed. And I think it is good that it's a single issue, but I think in its own way as well, Bernadette, that the single issue alone may also work against you, because exactly for that reason, what I've just highlighted there, some people feel, why am I being excluded here? Explain the importance of why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, I would challenge you on that, because I think it affects all of us. The fact that we have politicians who can lie about certain things affects all of us. You know, we have to have our politicians be able to tell us the truth. Okay, there is a certain group of people who want to believe they're the opposite sex. We don't make them the opposite sex in law and policy and guidance. You treat them separately. We want our politicians to be able to say and have the conversations as to how that's going to work in society. And, you know, if you are going to pretend that a whole group of people are a different group of people, and everyone keeps saying it's just a really small group of people, but I think they forget what we're like as a society. Okay, so we're contrary. So people will say they're the opposite sex. People will put it down on a form. They will sign things as the opposite sex just because they can. And then all our statistics going, you know, I mean, where was it? The Navy, they thought they'd have a lovely idea. They had a whole new ship. And what were we going to call it? They asked the people, what do we end up? Boat face or something. You know, people don't take things very seriously sometimes. And I think an awful lot of the statistics that we are going to be basing our society's decisions on are going to be obscured by just the fact that people are not, that have the opportunity to not say the truth. So politicians need to lead, they need to say the truth. We need to have truthful conversations about this. The safeguarding of women and children need to be at the front, and just our ability to say what is happening in society and statistically where things are. We need to do it. We can't lie anymore.
No, we can't, and it's not good for us. Lesley, Miss Sleep Fat Flower says women's rights are under attack. These brave women are standing up to be counted. Go, ladies! So here's the thing, Lesley. Tell us wherever Party of Women are standing, why should we vote for your candidates?
Vote for our candidates on a question of principle. You make it known that you're affected by this issue. You're affected by the issue of gender being pushed onto children, puberty being stolen from children, and you make it known that this issue isn't going to go away. That's why you vote for us, because we're not going to let it go away. The Party of Women are standing, fighting for our sex-based rights to be restored, while the rest of civil society, the managerial class of civil society, decide whether we have these rights or not.
Ridiculous.
These rights have been fought for more than me. Us women have fought for this right, and we are not going to let it slip away. So that's why people vote for us. People vote for us on a question of principle, and that is that we take the question of women's rights and child safeguarding seriously in this country. That's why you vote for the Party of Women.
Dad Hooper says protecting women, and so Dad Hooper, we're assuming is a man, says protecting women and children is not a single issue. It is the issue. Yes. That is really interesting. Yes. We love that. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning. This has been such an interesting political morning on Wake Up, and we greatly appreciate it. And I love seeing fresh voices, because it's time. We're all sick of the uni-party system. We're sick of the global dominance, and we're sick of what we're being told in terms of the whole gender operation is a grassroots organization, when we know, in fact, it's top down and there's money being applied into it to shut up people like the women on this screen. So thank you so much, everybody. Bernadette O'Malley and Lesley Woodburn from the Party of Women, which is run and led by Posey Parker. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck this week. That's all I can say. Good luck. Go for it. Go kick ass, ladies. Take good care of yourself. Good to have you with us. Thanks. Wonderful to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, do you know what? I agree. I don't think it is a single issue, actually. I mean, I do take that point, Dad Hooper, because it does impact us all, doesn't it? And also, listen, I want to address this because I do think there's something that Beyond Belief was saying here, which I take your point, having looked at the family courts. Beyond Belief, don't get me wrong, you're absolutely right. The family courts is a discriminatory system. It's a secretive system. So much is allowed to take place there, which is harmful to both children and parents. I completely get it. But I also understand why they needed to start this as a single issue, because if they're going across everything, it all becomes too much. And there's a focus to this, which they can always branch out, can't they? They can always widen it out. Thank you so much for joining us, by the way. I don't know what the figures are saying out there, but we're nearly on 3,000 on the live stream, according to this, which I have in the background here. I do take his point. I really do take his point. It is the right place. This is absolutely the right place to address that issue beyond belief, because I've done loads of work into the family court system and it's horrific. And you're absolutely right. Not knocking you at all there, mate. Not knocking you at all. Right. Few things. Let's talk. When I talked in Edinburgh recently, I met lovely Edie, who asked me about the Franklin affair. And I knew I'd heard about it. I had some recollection about it, but frankly, I knew nothing about it. Well, she sent me stuff and I started to gen up on it. And it's exactly the stuff. And I only kind of laugh because, like, of an irony, not because I think it's funny, not at all. But it's exactly the sort of stuff that we've become used to in the UK. And in fact, that I documented in my film Paedophiles in Parliament. And the Franklin child ring allegations began in June 1988 in Omaha, Nebraska. Multiple prominent Nebraskan political and business figures were accused of involvement in this trafficking ring. And the allegations attracted significant public and political interest until late into the 1990s, when state and federal grand juries concluded that the rumors were unfounded and that it was a carefully crafted hoax. Of course, they concluded it was a hoax. Where have we heard that before when it comes to powerful people and the abuse of children? Edie, this is a curious story to me. You've got my curiosity going. I'm glad you brought it to my attention. We'll do an absolute deep dive into this, but I wanted to acknowledge that so that you know that I am on it. I've already started looking into it, and frankly, it is utterly, utterly shocking and beyond reprehensible, isn't it? It's beyond reprehensible. So the other thing that I want to talk about, of course, is Biden. Biden camps, they're in deep talks. I have a contact who contacted me and from the administration, said it's absolute disastrous. They are now in absolute deep talks about the disastrous debate that took place last week. They can no longer hide his problems. They've tried for as long as they can. They managed to hide Hillary Clinton's problems fairly well. Can you remember her flopping all over the place and needing assistance just to stand up? And really the question is, are they so desperate to keep the old guard because their secrets remain super safe, as the old guard are implicated in those secrets? But President Biden hunkered down at Camp David this weekend to discuss his future. And I think we're all absolutely aware that the person wearing the pants in that is Jill Biden. She's the one who's constantly pushing for him to remain in place. But it is highly likely that he is going to be removed, because I think he's now become an embarrassment that they can no longer hide. They simply can't hide how embarrassing this man is. They can't, not anymore. And hello to Lee, who tagged me on Instagram to say, Sonia, there's that year again. Yes, 2030. Indeed, there is that year again. And he alerted me to a post which was about the demand for rhino horn, which has been a major factor in the decline of that species, particularly in South Africa, where more than 10,000 rhinos have been brutally killed by poachers this century. So the reason that 2030 was mentioned in this is that the Born Free Foundation has unveiled a draft plan for managing the country's rhinos. It includes a proposal to reopen the international trade in rhino horn, which which could obviously spell disasters for rhinos across their range. Obviously they're against it, and there's a draft plan including, as I say, an intention to reintroduce rhinos currently under intensive management. This is all from the South African government, and their proposed date is December 2030, right? And that is, we are extremely, this is the Born Free Foundation saying, we are extremely concerned by proposals to pursue legal international trade in rhino horn from protected wild rhinoceros by December 2030. Now, I know there are lots of issues with the Born Free Foundation, and not least because Virginia, I think it's Virginia McKenna, isn't it, who started the Born Free Foundation. She is a raging globalist. She's, you know, King Charles's mate, and all part of that globalist system. But I can't fault her, hopefully, for protecting animals. No, I can't. What have we got here? Who's talking about prison? It's Biden's face, that stare with his mouth open. He looks to me like when the wife says, remember, we have plans this weekend. Yes, Soul Rebel. Forget about rhino horn. What with beans on toast, whatever next. We did not need to look after our elderly back then. Oops. So I'm missing some things here. I'm missing some things. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. But it's all right because everything's moving so fast. I also heard over the weekend from a music industry contact rather, about the dropping of Sean Diddy Combs by his lawyers. They've been with him for 20 years. And the rumor was that Lady Gaga, who is also represented by the same firm, said either you kick him out or I walk. And the problem is that this is a legal firm, Grubman Shire, Messalas and Sachs, and they represent some of the biggest heavy hitters in the music industry. And obviously, Sean Puffy Combs has been hit with all manner of allegations regarding trafficking and abuse. We also saw that video where he was clearly beating up his then girlfriend, Cassie. So he was kicked out by his New York attorneys, and Lady Gaga's team have denied that she had anything to do with it at all. Right? They've denied that. They're saying, no, that isn't true. That, the fact was that Alan Grubman, who is a partner in that law firm, he's a founder of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he actually became the first practicing lawyer to be inducted there in November 2022. And they've had huge, huge clients, past and present: Elton John, Barbara Streisand, The Weeknd, Madonna, U2 and Drake. You can see there's a awful lot of globalist clients going on there. And I am no fan of Diddy, but I just thought it was interesting because generally, right, really generally, law firms love it when their clients get into lots of trouble. So this is very interesting. So honestly, Sean Combs has had a brilliant run, hasn't he? I mean, I think I first interviewed him around, at a rough guess, it would probably been about 1992. And that was when he was I think he'd left Uptown. He started Bad Boy Records. I'm just remembering this all off the top of my head. So he's had a brilliant run for decades. But now the stuff is hitting the fan, and it's not doing well for them, is it? Pink Diamond says, looking at the USA makes me feel better about living in the UK. IBR Stella, Lady Gaga, and about that bath, right? Do you ever remember when she appeared on the X Factor? And I was horrified. I was actually horrified. I wrote commentary about it because it was some of the most sort of lewd, crude and satanic imagery that went out to a family audience that I had seen if probably ever. It was absolutely abhorrent. Who am I a fan of, Dad Hooper? Who am I a fan of? Well, it's getting increasingly difficult to be a fan of anybody. I mean, look, I'm an old school hip hop girl, right? I still love my hip hop, but I love lots of black music. I love kind of gospel, soul and funk. I even like good pop music. Right. I even like good pop music. I'm not an opera fan, and I'm not a heavy metal fan. Those are really like the only two music forms that I'm not a great fan of. Glad I've never heard of him, says Shug. Bill Gates. What are we talking about now? We're on to Bill Gates, are we? Interesting. Right. Let's just see. I must save that to the end. There were some stories up front early on that I didn't have time to look at, and I must look at them now. Just briefly, what are you doing out there? How are you doing out there? This has been a very busy live stream this morning, hasn't it? Which is fantastic. Absolutely love it. Yes, so please keep your geoengineering pictures coming in. And just to say, Sean, I'm just looking at your picture here. That is really weird. Sean, I quoted him earlier. He said, I'm not certain if this is a trail end or a start of spraying. And also just to say thank you so much for your support, for your donations. We're able to start changing things around here, bringing in new equipment, bringing in some new designs, getting some producers working on the show. And that is all as a consequence of you wonderful people out there. And can I just say, TNT, please change my name because this is false advertising. I received an email from Carrie. How do you pronounce that? Oh, I'm awful name pronunciation. She said, love your work. I love you too, sweetheart. She said, since you left TNT radio, I find it hard to listen, particularly your replacement, but I do dip in and out like this morning, filling time until your broadcast starts. This morning I opened the listen live box and it seems you are ever present. I can't believe that no one at TNT has noticed it. It might bother you though, so sending you a screenshot. And it actually says when Lembit Opic's show is on, when they go to the live to comment live, it actually says the Sonia Poulton show. Well, I left there over a month ago. So TNT, change that, please. False advertising. Yes, please do that. Just change it. And we can all move on, which is great. I've already moved on, as you can clearly see. Yes, you can clearly see I've already moved on. What else? Don't want to miss anything. Absolutely don't want to miss anything. Paul from We're In It Together wrote to me on Saturday. He was helping Catherine Evans and Ian Pugh of the Freedom Alliance, recent guests on here, actually, because remember what we said was that so many of the independent parties are not getting any airtime. So we give them airtime leading up to the general election, which obviously we've done this morning with Andrew Bridgen and with the Party of Women. And Paul was out helping campaign for the Freedom Alliance, and he came across Angela Eagle. Angela Eagle, of course, famously, she's a former Labour MP. He's been a constituent of hers for years. And it's an astonishing video. It's online. He walks towards her and he's very polite. He's not aggressive. And the minute she clocks him, she's off. She starts walking down the street. She's got her assistant with her with his pride umbrella, which is hilarious. It just like in one image, it just says so much that's wrong, frankly. And she's walking away. And Angela Eagle was famously involved in Brickgate. I don't know if you remember that in 2016, but Paul reminded me of it. And what he said was on the day she announced that she'd be challenging Jeremy Corbyn for the Labour leadership, quote, a brick was thrown through her constituency office window. And then Paul says, except it wasn't her constituency office window. Now, if you remember, much was made about that. That was covered all across mainstream media. And it was very much seen as, oh, this poor woman is being attacked because she's daring to go up against the great Jeremy Corbyn. And her publicity man at the time was Imran Ahmed. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's made a bit of a name for himself in recent years as the CEO for the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. And he's come out against lots of truth seekers, him and his organisation. And many people, including me, have a problem with his organisation, not least because it is clear internet censorship. But as far as the police were concerned, there was no evidence to show that the constituency window of Angela Eagle was hit by a brick. It took 6 months for the truth to get its boots on, as Paul said, and for this crucial information to emerge. I was her nemesis throughout all of this, hence the sulky looks and the poor reception I've been receiving whenever I meet her. He complained to the press regulator at the time and got nowhere. Oh, Paul, you should have made some comments about jabs. You'd have got everywhere. And so I think that's interesting because, I mean, the bottom line is this. He's one of her constituents. He wasn't rude. He was just asking her questions. And they don't like to be asked questions, do they? Go back to what I said at the beginning when I introduced Andrew Bridgen. And that is when I invite MPs on, they want to know what questions I'm going to ask them. And he didn't, which was great. But Angela Eagle wants to be able to, conduct herself in a certain way and not be held to account by her constituents. So, Paul, more power to your elbow, frankly. Dad, you're having to go at me. Genres ain't artists, Sonia. Well, Public Enemy was always one of my favorite bands. I love Public Enemy and I still love Public Enemy. I was just incredibly disappointed that Public Enemy went along with the COVID narrative, as indeed I was extremely angry that so many artists that I support did. And Lyra says, not an eagle, more like a vulture. And the Wizard's words, I understand what you're saying there. Gangster rap was to keep black youth violent and angry. Ice Cube admitted it. I wrote a piece about this, actually, this exactly that. Now, June, are you the lady who has written to me about HS2? Because I've got a little bit of info for you. I promised you that I would look at this in some detail. Before I get to that, I'm just going down this. Anybody see that footage from Wandsworth Prison, right? Extraordinary. So a prison officer is literally being filmed having sex with a prisoner in Wandsworth, Southwest London, just down the road from me. She's been charged with misconduct. Her name is Linda De Sousa Abro. She's only 30 years old. She's got quite a history. She's on a Channel 4 program to do with swingers. Looks like both her and her husband are pretty much up to the same thing. It is a truly abhorrent clip and just actually shocking. And I just looked at it and I thought, everybody in this image, everybody in this video are just perverts, frankly. But yes, so she's been charged. Now, June, coming to you, you wrote to me the other week about HS2. For those who don't know, HS2 is a high-speed railway which is under construction in England. The route will be between Staffordshire and London with a sort of spur to Birmingham. And it's supposed to be Britain's second purpose-built high-speed railway after High Speed 1, which connects London to the Channel Tunnel. And it's been delayed. And in fact, some of the people that I've talked to, June, since I've been doing some research into this, the general response is people thought HS2 had been cancelled, right, June? So that's interesting, but not at all, of course. In fact, during the course of my research, which is far from completed, but seeing as I saw you in the comment, I thought I'd update you. In fact, I listened to a video by an HS2 construction manager from the end of May. It had been carefully scripted, and he said HS2 is currently at peak construction. They're currently employing 31,000 people, right? And I watched videos about tunnel boring equipment and how they've now been digging under London for the first time, June. And you and I know that they have destroyed the countryside in order to be able to pull High Speed 2 off. This, I think, is a fairly outrageous story. It's an outrageous development. I don't think it has that much public support. This is about corporatism and capitalism. And June, I'm still working on it. But just to say, I wanted to find out from people what people thought about it. And honestly, the majority opinion that I've been able to garner is, one, that it was cancelled because it was too problematic, including taking down huge swathes of people's homes and countrysides. And that the whole thing had stalled, but not at all. They are motoring ahead. So June, I will keep updating you on that. Huge fan. Drumstick. I was huge fan of NWA and Ice Cube. Went to Ice Cube's home, met his mum, and you know, it's only over the last few years that I've had to wonder: did I name my daughter after Ice Cube? Her name's Shay, and his name is O'Shea. And you know, sometimes those things happen, don't they, subliminally, without you realizing it. Murph says, how can that prison officer be allowed to report for duty looking like that? Makeup, false eyelashes, red nails. Well, we all knew what she was reporting for, right? Leo Guy said, just imagine if we had Diane Abbott as PM. Goodness me. Boris's train set, says Michael G. Yeah, absolutely. And he flip-flopped on it as well, hasn't he, on HS2? He was like, no, I'm against it. Oh, I'm for it. I'm against it. Backwards and forwards. Who's Jelly Roll? And listen to his song, Save Me. Says, HS2 is irrelevant to most people, said Aidan. I love old rollers. What, as in Bay City rollers, Ian? Because when I was a kid, I was a major Bay City roller fan. I even had 5 pairs of their knickers with their faces across it. So, yes. And also, oh, Anita, thank you for your pictures, along with everybody else. I have to say, I'm just looking at Anita's pictures. She sent me her sky in Hampshire on Saturday morning. Look, I'm just looking at the absolute state of it. That's quite a display. The next stage, lovely people, of course, is for you to be able to see the imagery on screens. I don't want to mess around with it. I don't want to get involved in there. I'm going to be bringing in a producer who's going to be doing all that, and we'll start to properly function. As you know, this has always been a soft launch, right? And can I say, that AI has given me even worse trust issues than I already had. And see, the problem about AI and our advanced technological world and the deep fakes that it's actually producing has left me questioning what is real and what is fake. And I'm even struggling to believe what is happening right in front of my own eyes. We've sort of entered a deeply difficult time where we have to use our discernment like never before. We've been told all our lives that photos don't lie, and that videos don't lie. Well, yesterday I watched a man literally remove his face on camera, and it had all been created by AI, and it freaked me out. And the thing is that what we know absolutely about photos and videos is not only do they lie, but they tell big whoppers, whether that's airbrushing some Kardashian on Instagram or creating a deep fake. The evidence suggests that we cannot trust our eyes anymore. And that's not a great place to be. And I have to wonder whether that is the intention, because I think a lot of what went on over the last 4 years was about making us question our sanity and where we stood on those issues, right? Yeah, they did. And they did destroy ancient woodland for the bloody HS2. They really did. The more I look into it, I have to say, the more horrendous it becomes. Obviously, lots of people were paid money for it. I believe Andrew Bridgen was actually one of the people who sold his house because it was in the way of the HS2. Lots of people. Shin, what stage are you at? Overload of data input. We need to go back, meeting up in the pub. Lyra says it feels like everything's colluding to create a mass inability to trust in anything. It makes for a very vulnerable and unsettled population. Drum says it will only get harder from now on. Rowie, wait, what is it? What's that? No, it's not Sonia, but it seems so. What's that? That we can no longer trust our eyes. Here's the thing. This is why I've chosen a viewer's request to end today's show, because it kind of like it triggered me thinking that this whole issue of AI and the problems that I have with it. By the way, people, according to the figures now, we're on 3,245. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We truly, truly appreciate it. And by the way, quick question, is this the end of the road for electric cars? I ask because there is a problem with electric cars, and it would seem that the demand for them is falling substantially, so certainly according to Auto Trader. I was just reading some stats and facts from Auto Trader, and Auto Trader is a big name when it comes to cars, obviously in terms of selling cars, massive big name. And it says that the number of inquiries sent to retailers about new electric cars has fallen 65% year on year. Get this, they now only account for 9% of all new car inquiries compared to 27% at the same time last year. People have had enough. People have had enough. I see. Yes. Have you got an electric car? Let me know if you've got an electric car, whether you like them or not, right? Whether you like them or not. Okay. What's going on here? EVs need loads of fossil fuels for the electric. Yeah, they do. Absolutely horrendous. Petition for Declan's Law UK on hold because of the general election. Says Kenneth. Hello, Kenneth. Haven't you been on with me before? I think you have. Yeah, thank you, Merv. Really appreciate that. My friend's a breakdown driver. Electric cars are abysmal, says Anne. And they're also quite scary when they come down our street. If you're like walking down our street, right, you can't hear them coming behind you. And by the way, London is almost entirely now populated by Sadiq Khan's electric buses, and they are too hot in the summer and too cold in winter, right? And we're still paying huge amounts of money for them. Yes, we are. The markets are being flooded with cheap bid models. Some say it means burn your driveway. Wizard said, I'd hate the sound of an electric motorbike, all the fun gone to... on my 16th birthday, I got on HP because I couldn't afford it outright. I got a Honda 50cc, which it was built like a proper motorbike. It didn't look like a scooter or anything. It looked proper, and it was absolutely wonderful. And me and my Bezzy mate Susie Gibson, who was born 5 days before me, also got the same. We both got a Honda 50, and it was absolutely wonderful. No one can repair them, really. Who's talking about pork scratchings? Electric point in my road. I've seen used once in 2 years, said Dad. Hardly used around here. Same thing. Also, got to ask a quick question, and that is, this is about rehabilitation. This next story that I want to just quickly, briefly refer to, because it's quite difficult on YouTube talking about this, but it's about, can offenders be rehabilitated so they are no longer a threat to society? And even if they can, should we be promoting them to national and international prominence? Now, I ask that because the Dutch Olympic Committee has defended its choice to select a convicted rapist for its volleyball team, insisting that the player has shown self-insight and reflection. I doubt that's what his victim thinks. His 12-year-old victim, by the way, Steven van der Velde, was jailed in 2016 for 4 years after he admitted to 3 counts of rape against a British child, which took place in August 2014. Van der Velde was 19 at the time. He met the victim on Facebook. He then flew from Amsterdam to the UK to meet the girl. And at her address in Milton Keynes, she was the judge who sentenced Van der Velde said that his Olympic prospects were a shattered dream. Well, not half as shattered as his victim. I got that age wrong, by the way. I'm just looking for the age, but nonetheless, the point being is that he is a convicted rapist. And so where do we stand on that? Where do we stand on that? Should he be part of the Olympic volleyball team? Because this is not very long ago, right? Or do we have a place in our society for rehabilitation? Because I think that's an important story, right? Yeah, Crazy Bunny, it is. It is really, isn't it? And it is quite a strange one. Jail them and throw away the key, and that is too good for them, says Aloha. Aloha is not messing around today. And I think it's a tricky one. I want to talk on Friday about smartphone-free childhood. There's an organisation that has been set up, and they're actually doing very, very well. Do you know, in the UK, 91% of 11-year-olds have a smartphone. And we are only just finding out about the long-term damage of this. Many children are being given smartphones at 3 years old, according to research. What parent gives their 3-year-old a smartphone? Stop being an idiot. It's absolutely ridiculous. But so I want to cover that on Friday, because I think that's a brilliant initiative, and it is about sort of making children have to be older for a smartphone. And some parents have said to me before, yeah, but the point is that I feel happier knowing that my child has a phone when they're out. I get you, but it doesn't have to be a smartphone, does it? Can't it just be like the most basic one where it's like text? Doesn't have to take them on the internet. Text and ring. They still have basic ones, don't they? Surely. So let's talk about that on Friday. I think we're coming close to the end here, lovely people, and we are actually. Don't forget, keep your suggestions coming in, either for guests or subjects. I was up for that. Please, as I say, drop me a line, let me know what's happening. I want to look quickly at the news headlines just before we leave, and just see what they're saying. And anything going on here? Oh, apparently unions are pushing for a 4-day week. We shall see. I've always said we should have a 4-day week. I think it's outrageous we have a 5-day working week, frankly. It's completely wrong. And it's imbalanced, because that means that most people only get 2 days off and 5 days on. Whereas if they had 4 days on, 3 days off, I believe, and there is evidence from around the world from studies which suggest that people are more productive in 4 days than they are in 5 days. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Which brings us, to our final thing. Our final thing today is an email from Jen saying, Sonia, you talk about intuition and how you trust your solar plexus, right? But how can you tell what is what? I think I get my intuition confused with fear. Any tips? Now, I hear that, Jen. And yes, obviously, as you know, I'm not a psychologist, but I did do a psychology degree and I'm constantly reading and genning up on psychology. For me, psychology is in everything. And I think we should have as good an understanding about our psychological makeup as we do about reading and writing. If it was up to me, I'd introduce it into primary schools. And I think it would help so much with human relations. So let's talk about intuition, because I used to go through this as well. I used to be like, when we all know what intuition feels like, right? It's kind of like, well, it has different effects on you. It can be, you know, hair rising up on your arms. It can be hairs coming up at the back of your neck. It can just be a feeling in your gut that something is up, right? But whatever it is, you do get a visceral reaction. Your intuition gives you a visceral reaction, but obviously many people do confuse it with fear and anxiety. So first of all, what is intuition? Well, according to the Cambridge Dictionary definition, it is an ability to understand or know something immediately based on your feelings rather than facts. And often there is no clear evidence one way or the other, and you just have to base your judgment on your intuition. And it's, you know, when people say things like, I can't explain how I knew, I just knew, because we know that there's something deep down in our bones which is taking us in a certain direction, right? So what I kind of want to focus on is how to trust your gut feeling and how to recognize it. And, you know, when you are trying to make a decision, it's really important to differentiate between intuition and fear, because one of the things that, when I've sought feedback on this from various psychologists and various psych people to help me understand what intuition is, one of the things that really resonated with me was being told that intuition will feel like a calm certainty, whereas fear will feel stressful and anxious. And I think that's a good way to divide it up, because you know when you know something. Yes, you do. I do, right? And but also, sometimes the inability to tell the difference between what is your gut instinct and your intuition and what is fear can actually indicate subconscious factors which are actually sabotaging your progress, right? And so it can really help you, because when you get that feeling, when you get that understanding, when you get that kind of alarm, what would really help if you start to unpack it? Ask basic questions. One psychologist said to me, talk to it. Literally say to your body, what are you trying to tell me now? Show me. I really want to understand. I really want to work with you. I know that may sound like crazy gobbledygook, but it works, right? Because the thing is that good intuition, when you're operating at kind of like, you know, the full level, it's really exciting. You can be like totally in tune with other people. Like I often can tell when somebody is going to contact me, like minutes before they contact me. I think about them. That's my intuition. I'm on the level with them. And I know that you get it as well. You know, some people call it a sixth sense, right? So here's the thing. I think it's really helpful to unpack that feeling and that anxiety you get when you're uncertain whether it's intuition or not, because those are the things that are likely holding you back. Right? Those are the things, because self-sabotage is a real thing, right? We overthink. Human beings overthink, right? We jump to fear-based conclusions too often. And you know what? A fear of success or failure, which comes when you complete things, could be your way of talking yourself out of facing the final kind of, you know, a conclusion of something. I know somebody who used to say that he was concerned, he never finished things, and he was concerned about finishing things because that's when he'd be judged. And so he felt that his intuition was telling him that these projects weren't right for him. But actually what we discovered was not at all. It's your fear and anxiety, which is telling you that you're insecure about what you're doing, when in fact what you need to do is build up your confidence about what it is that you bring to the world. And he did, and he's doing it. And I love that. Oh, what's this? What's all these messages? Can't take your calls right now. Thank you very much. Just got a call from the BBC. I can see them here. I've got it on silent, but I always keep it on just in case any of my guests need to contact me to say that they can't come on. But also, what you can also recognize from that kind of, is it intuition or is it fear, is your intuition could actually be telling you something is off. So the fear could be legitimate, right? It could be that your intuition is saying, no, you're right. This situation is too good to be true, and you're going to end up in a terrible position at the end of it. And you'll end up carrying the burden of it and all of those things. But also the other thing that you can get from is this intuition or is this fear is to see the golden opportunity that is inherent in that, right? It is an amazing opportunity when we radically shift things and our understanding, and especially when we start allowing for the fact that see, the thing is, I absolutely believe, in fact I know, that any of the questions that we ask about ourselves, we already have the answers to. We already have the answers to. Our body knows us better than we know ourselves, right? And by that, I mean our kind of conscious brain. Our subconscious is phenomenal. Our body is carrying so much information, so much data. It can definitely guide us in the right direction, no doubt about it. And so what I would say to you, Jen, is the next time that you feel that sensation of intuition, ask yourself, is this my instinct telling me something about this, or is this my fear? Am I overthinking this situation? Ask yourself some basic questions about it. Because the thing is, once you are able to tell the difference between intuition and fear, this is when you're going to be able to create what you most deeply desire. I mean, that's just a fact, right? And I know that from experience, because when I considered leaving TNT, who were paying me very well, very decently, to do a breakfast show 5 days a week. And when I realized that it was, what's this? Trying to rake in. What's this? When I realized that it was untenable for me to remain there, and I had to ask myself, what shall I do? And my intuition was screaming, it is time for you to go it alone, sister. You've got to go it alone. You can't be working for other people. Yes, you can have people backing you, but you have to do what you think is right for the people. And I haven't ever been able to do that. I wasn't able fully to do that at Rise, because obviously I was employed by somebody who has their own ideas about how things should be. And certainly we clashed on issues to do with Islam as one example. And then when I went to TNT, and TNT didn't want me to talk about geoengineering, didn't want me to talk much about child abuse. So there were issues there, obviously. And I was like, okay, I've got to move on. I've got to do this myself. And I am still kind of censored. Obviously, we know, even being on this live stream, but we're working around it as best we can. And Dad, are you praying for comfortable solution? What's this? Rational. Oh, what's this? I'm missing this. Fear and intuition are not mutually exclusive, though. You can be intuitively fearful. Absolutely. JHH, House Media. Absolutely. That is my point there. Sometimes your intuition is telling you absolutely have a right to be fearful about this situation, right? And MK Ultra says, interesting. The trolls for Andrew have departed the chat. Yeah, well, they probably arrived only for that. I didn't actually see any trolls, to be honest with you. I probably just didn't see them. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Dad. I am. And so anyway, so what I decided was I was just going to launch this, and I did. And then people started to get behind it. So sometimes you have to take that leap. My intuition was screaming at me, it's time to go it alone. And that's what I did. And yes, please hit the like button. You get good karma, says Crazy Bunny. Crazy Bunny, are we telling them the truth here? Because this sounds a little bit misleading to me. Thank you, Shanti. I really appreciate that. It is James, isn't it, James? Yes. These are all fair points. Absolutely, they are. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, by the way. And greatly appreciate it all. Yes, love that, Shug. Say stifled instead of censored. That's a good point. And I like that. Buzzacino said, it is said that in times of change, it is best to follow your flow, for in times of change, it is harder to lie to your heart, right? Oh, Miami Rose says, help your intuition by deleting fluoride from your life. Like that. I like that. Because obviously that's got to be to do with the pineal gland, right? And you get in the way of the pineal gland, that automatically interferes with your intuition, right? No, Dad Hooper, he didn't name names. He explained why he couldn't, because not least for defamation. You have to be so careful in these situations. And I would not have encouraged him to name names on here. And I'll tell you why, because I watched the whole VIP abuse scandal erupt, and I was watching a number of MPs coming out like John Mann, Simon Danchuk, for example, and they were making lots of noise and lots of accusations about what was going on. And what happened in the end, right? The whole thing got discredited. So when you start to throw out names willy-nilly, it creates lots of problems. And certainly it can create problems in terms of actually getting justice. So I just want that thing stopped. It has to be stopped. That trafficking has to stop. That needs to be dealt with, 100%. Yes, calcifying the pineal, got you. You're welcome. What's this? Sonia, a super cool, slick, psychedelic chick. Thank you so much. Also a Shinri T song. Wonderful. Monopod said, great timing, Sonia. Read the topic of intuition. I needed to hear that right now. I'm really glad to hear that. Listen, thank you all, everybody. We are ending on 3,590. Oh, gone, just jumped, 3,601 views. Thank you so much. I appreciate you greatly. Thank you. Thank you so much, James. Beware of people trying to be heroes. Yeah, we don't need any more heroes. Thank you, Jen. Wait, Jen, are you the Jen who asked about intuition? Thank you, Jen. Distill your own drinking and cooking water, says Beyond Belief. Good point. Our Space Cat said the stream helps me feel sane. Wonderful to hear it. Soul Evolved Psychic, I like that. Learn to be present, meditate, do more of the inner healing work and work to clear pain and trauma. All these things help you to clear the channels that help you tune more into your own intuition. And hooray for all that. These are beautiful words. And Rupert said, learn to question absolutely everything. It's fun. Yes, it is. Except if you're a parent with a very questioning child. I remember when my daughter was 6 years old and I bought surprise tickets to take her to Disneyland Paris. And I said to her, guess where we're going? Disneyland Paris. And my daughter, she's a questioning individual, even at 6 years old, she wanted to know how we were getting there, what the weather was going to be like, who was going to be there, was it going to be any fun at all? This was my daughter at 6 years old, right? Wizard's words, so is bicarbonate of soda in water. I always keep bicarbonate of soda in the house. Brilliant for emergency measures. So lovely people, I'm going to leave you today. As always, I'm going to leave you with a quote, and it's a quote about intuition. It's from Alan Alda. Thank you again for joining us this morning. I truly appreciate you all. God, there's so many wonderful people on here. Thank you, Aidan. Thank you, Chella. Really appreciate that. Great show, covering topics others don't touch. Perfect. Thanks, Sonia, for a kickstart to the week ahead. I love you all so much. Thank you for your input. And you know, I can take criticism around here, so feel free to criticize. And you know, if you didn't like something, nearly 2 hours, where did that time go? Absolutely. We are out of here, people. But first of all, I'm going to leave you with this. Thank you to my wonderful mods, by the way. Aren't they terrific? Alan Alda said, you have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. What you'll discover will be wonderful. What you'll discover is yourself. Have a fantastic week. I'll see you Friday. Take excellent care of yourself, people. Love you lots. See you Friday.